Hello, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Tonight's story isn't about slow suspicions or little red flags, it's about the exact moment everything came apart in front of strangers who didn't know what to do with their eyes. The room smelled faintly of grilled rosemary chicken and burnt espresso, and somewhere behind me a jazz trio was playing a slow, lazy tune. People were talking over their plates, glasses clinking, all the background noise of a normal evening. And then there was me, standing by a table in the far corner, holding a small object in my hand that I'd carried for years but never thought I'd be giving back. She was there, leaning back in her chair, her fingers lazily circling the rim of her wine glass. Across from her sat a man who looked like he belonged in a magazine ad, crisp shirt, a confident smirk, the kind of presence that made you feel like the lighting had been arranged just for him. They were mid-laughter when I stepped forward. She didn't flinch. In fact, the smile stayed right there, like my presence was just a background detail. I didn't say a word. I placed the ring, her ring, dead center between them on the polished wood. It made a sharp, distinct sound that seemed to cut through the music. Conversations around us stuttered and slowed, like a record player being switched off mid-song. I could feel the heat in my face, but my voice, when it finally came, was softer than I expected. "You can keep it," I told her, each word sticking in my throat. "It looks like it means more to him now." Her fingers froze against the glass. The man's smirk faltered, but only just. The table to my left had gone completely silent, fork suspended mid-air. I thought that was the peak of the tension, but then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not embarrassed. A light, almost amused sound, like I'd just made a small social misstep. And that was when I realized, she wasn't shocked because she'd been caught. She was shocked because she thought I wouldn't actually do it. The moment that followed made the entire restaurant hold its breath, and it's the part that still plays in my head every single night. The laughter that slipped out of her lips echoed in my head far louder than the soft clink of the ring on the table. I don't think anyone in that room expected that sound, not the couple to our left who were now blatantly staring, not the server frozen halfway through pouring water at another table, and certainly not me. She tilted her head, regarding me like I was some oddly dressed tourist asking for directions to a place that didn't exist. Simon, I didn't know his name then, but I'd find it out soon enough, leaned back with the kind of slow, casual movement that said he believed this was his turf now. "You're making a scene, Lowell," she murmured, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. My throat felt dry, my chest tight, but I refused to look away. I could feel my knees wanting to fold under me, my mind already spiraling into the same self-pity I'd been drowning in for months, telling myself maybe I'd overreacted, maybe I should just leave quietly. But something about the way she casually reached for the ring, like it was just a coin someone had dropped on the table, made my stomach churn. When her fingers touched the band, I stepped forward, pressing my hand gently over it before she could take it. I could see the faint confusion flash in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. "No," I said, my voice cracking on the single syllable. "Not yet. Everyone here deserves to hear this first." I don't know why I said it, but in that moment, my own humiliation wasn't enough. I wanted the truth to hang in the air where it couldn't be ignored, not by her, not by him, and certainly not by me anymore. Simon straightened in his seat, his jaw tightening just slightly. Nadine let out a slow exhale, her smile thinning but never quite disappearing. "Lowell, you're embarrassing yourself," she said, louder this time, the words carrying just enough for a few more heads to turn. My heart pounded in my ears, but I kept going. 3 weeks ago, I began, my hands trembling at my sides, you told me you were staying late for a team project. That same night, a friend saw you here. Same table. Same wine. Same man. I gestured toward him, my tone quivering between anger and despair. And the next morning, you kissed me goodbye like it never happened. The tension was thick enough to feel, like the air had been pulled tight around us. Simon's hand rested flat on the table now, his eyes locked on mine, but he didn't speak. Nadine leaned back, finally breaking eye contact, swirling what was left of her wine. "If you came here to make me feel guilty," she said, "you've wasted your time. I stopped feeling guilty a long time ago." A quiet gasp came from somewhere nearby, and I realized the jazz trio had stopped playing. The entire restaurant had gone still. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, she reached for the ring again, and this time, she pushed it toward me instead of taking it. The gesture was small, almost gentle, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. And then she said something that made every single person in that room stare at us like they'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. Her hand lingered on the ring for just a second before she pushed it toward me, and in that motion, there was a finality I hadn't expected. But it wasn't the gesture that knocked the air out of me, it was the words that followed. "You were never supposed to be in my life this long," Nadine said calmly, almost matter-of-factly, as if she were explaining why she'd returned an item to a store. The sentence didn't just sting, it shattered something inside me I didn't even realize was holding the rest of me together. I heard a sharp inhale from a woman at the next table, and out of the corner of my eye, the server set down a tray like he'd forgotten why he was holding it. I stared at her, my fingers frozen just short of the ring. The phrase rolled around in my head like a cruel riddle. My first instinct, as always, was to shrink, apologize for being in the way, for somehow being the inconvenience she made me out to be. But another part of me, the part that had been silently tallying her late nights, her guarded phone, the perfume that lingered in the air when she came home, refused to let this be just another moment where I walked away quietly. "Then why keep me?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. "Why the years, the promises, the vows, if you always knew?" Her lips twitched like she was trying to hide a smirk, and she glanced at Simon. He didn't look smug anymore, he looked like a man who just realized he was standing on a bridge that was starting to crack. "You made things comfortable," she replied. "Stable. And when you were no longer useful, well," she let the sentence trail off and shrugged. That casual dismissal lit something in me that wasn't anger, it was a raw, hollow ache that I knew would sit in my chest for a long time. The silence in the restaurant had turned from curious to heavy, like everyone was collectively bracing for something. My legs felt weak, but I straightened my shoulders and finally picked up the ring. I didn't slip it back into my pocket. I held it in my palm, staring at it like it was an artifact from a life I'd dreamed but never actually lived. "You should know," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough now for the nearest tables to hear, "that when you think you're playing me, everyone else sees exactly who you are." Nadine's eyes narrowed, her veneer of composure finally starting to crack, but before she could speak, Simon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I think you should go," he said to me, trying to reclaim control. But his voice didn't carry the same authority his smug expression had earlier. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, and not in his favor. I could feel dozens of unseen stares pressing against my back, waiting for my next move, and for the first time that night, I realized I wasn't the only one who wanted to see how this ended. And then, without thinking, I did something that made a glass shatter, a chair tip over, and turned that quiet, tense restaurant into a scene none of us would forget. The moment my fingers closed tighter around the ring, something inside me finally snapped. I'd been holding back for months, biting my tongue, swallowing my doubts, pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. But here, with her confession hanging in the air like smoke, I realized there was no dignity in silence anymore. Without a word, I leaned forward and set the ring in the middle of her plate, right on top of her untouched entree, letting the sauce smear across the band. Gasps rippled from the nearby tables, and I swear even the candles seemed to flicker harder for a moment. Nadine's eyes widened just enough to tell me I'd finally caught her off guard, and the sound of the plate shifting under the weight of that tiny object felt like a door slamming shut on everything we'd been. Simon shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening, his gaze darting to the growing audience around us. He muttered something under his breath to her, but I cut him off before she could respond. "Do you know what it's like to walk into your own home and feel like a guest?" I asked, my voice trembling but louder now, the words spilling out before I could filter them. To smell someone else's cologne lingering in the air. To hear your wife humming a tune you know damn well didn't come from a playlist you share. I could feel the weight of every single eye in the room, the tension coiling tighter with each syllable. Nadine leaned back, crossing her arms, trying to project boredom, but I saw the pulse in her neck quicken. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said flatly, though there was an edge to her tone that hadn't been there before. "Leave before you make this worse." Her words might have stung any other night, but tonight they just fueled me. I turned my gaze to Simon, who was still posturing like he was the calm one here. "You think you're sitting here with someone who's yours," I said to him directly, my voice low but sharp. "But give it time, she'll look at you the same way she's looking at me now. Like you're a receipt she's already thrown away." A sharp crack suddenly broke through the tension, Nadine's wine glass tipping as she jerked forward, sending red liquid splashing across the tablecloth and dripping onto the floor. One of the servers rushed over with towels, but nobody moved to actually clean it. They were too busy watching. The jazz trio, which had quietly resumed a few bars earlier, stopped again mid-note. The entire restaurant had become a stage, and whether I liked it or not, I was at the center of it. I pushed the chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood, and stood there for a moment, taking in the scene, her frozen expression, his shallow attempt at a smirk, the silent crowd holding their breath. I could have walked out right then and left it at that, but something in me wasn't ready to give them the last word. My hands were shaking, my voice tight, but I leaned in just enough so they could both hear me over the silence. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, "because after tonight, you won't be able to eat here again without remembering this." And then I reached for something on the table that would make sure of it, turning this from a tense standoff into an unforgettable public disaster. My hand hovered over the table for a second, and I could feel their eyes following the movement, both Nadine's and Simon's, as if they knew something was about to happen but couldn't quite predict it. I picked up the chilled carafe of water that the server had left between us. The condensation dripped down onto my fingers, my grip tightening until my knuckles whitened. Nadine's brow furrowed just slightly, and Simon straightened in his chair like a man ready to defend himself. Without raising my voice, without theatrics, I tipped the carafe forward and poured its contents directly over the ring sitting in the middle of her plate. The icy water splashed across the food, cascading over the edges, soaking the pristine tablecloth, and spilling into her lap. Gasps burst from several tables at once, a couple in the corner even half standing to get a better look. Nadine jerked back, her chair screeching loudly against the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped, her voice finally cracking into something raw and unpolished. Her perfect composure had split wide open, and for the first time all night, I saw the panic in her eyes. Simon reached for a napkin like that would somehow fix the scene, but it was too late. Every head in that restaurant was turned toward us. Conversations had stopped. Phones had quietly appeared in a few hands. I knew this would be whispered about for weeks, maybe months. "You wanted an ending?" I said quietly, my voice trembling but audible enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Now you've got one. And everyone here knows exactly who you are." My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them into the table to steady myself. I wasn't doing this to be heroic. I wasn't doing it to win. This wasn't victory, it was closure, in the messiest, most public way possible. Nadine's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for the perfect retort, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted to Simon, who still hadn't stood up, and then to the people watching. The weight of those stares was doing more damage than anything I could have said. I could almost see the realization settling over her, that the story she would have to tell about tonight would never paint her as the victim. She grabbed her bag, muttering something under her breath, and stormed toward the door. Simon hesitated for a few seconds before finally standing and following her, the smirk long gone. The door closed behind them, but the silence stayed, heavy and electric. I stayed standing there for a moment, the ring still sitting in the middle of the soggy plate, water pooling around it. I didn't take it back. I didn't want it. When I finally walked out, I could feel the eyes of every single person in that room on me, and not one of them said a word. It wasn't until I reached the street, breathing in the cool night air, that I realized this wasn't the end of the story, it was the start of something else entirely. Because Nadine wasn't the type to disappear quietly, and deep down, I knew she wasn't done with me yet. I barely slept that night. Even after I left the restaurant and put a few blocks between me and the scene I'd caused, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The image of Nadine's face, half shock, half fury, was burned into my mind. I kept replaying the moment the water poured over the ring, wondering if I'd gone too far or not far enough. My phone stayed silent for hours, and I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, she'd let it go. But Nadine was not a let-it-go type of person. By the next morning, the storm had already started brewing. It began with the knocks. Not gentle taps, sharp, deliberate knocks that rattled my apartment door at 7 in the morning. I opened it to find my landlord standing there with a sour expression and a printed sheet in his hand. "I've had complaints," he said without preamble, shoving the paper at me. My stomach dropped when I saw the grainy screenshots. There I was, in the middle of Carson's, leaning over the table, water splashing, Nadine recoiling. Someone had filmed it, and the clip had been posted online overnight. The caption wasn't subtle: "When your husband crashes date night." It already had thousands of views. I told him it wasn't what it looked like, but his raised eyebrow made it clear he didn't care. "I don't need trouble in my building," he muttered before leaving. I stood there in my doorway, feeling the humiliation sink deeper. It wasn't just a messy scene anymore, it was public entertainment. By midday, my phone lit up with messages from mutual friends, some pretending to check in, others fishing for gossip. And then Nadine herself called. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. Her voice was icy and deliberate. "You think you embarrassed me," she said. "Lowell, you have no idea what you've started." She didn't yell. Nadine never needed volume to make a threat. "People forget things fast," she continued, "but I can make sure they remember you for all the wrong reasons." I laughed, though it came out brittle. "What are you going to do, post more videos?" Her pause was long enough to make my skin crawl. "Videos?" she said, her tone dripping with something I didn't like. "Oh, I have more than that. You left your laptop unlocked a lot more than you think." My chest tightened. I had no idea what she meant specifically, but I knew she wasn't bluffing. Nadine was calculated. If she hinted at having something, she had it. That night, my social media started lighting up. An old photo of me from a college party I barely remembered resurfaced, edited with captions that painted me as a clingy, pathetic husband who couldn't take a hint. Comments poured in, some defending me, most mocking. Every account that shared it was tied back to one of Nadine's friends. She wasn't just reacting, she was mobilizing. And the worst part? She was good at it. By the time I turned my phone off, I knew I was in deeper trouble than I'd realized. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore, it was about control, and Nadine was making sure everyone knew who had it. I told myself I wouldn't break, but the truth was, she'd already found the cracks. And when I woke up the next morning, there was something waiting for me at my door that made me realize she wasn't even close to finished. The package was small enough to fit in my hand, wrapped in plain brown paper with no return address. For a few seconds, I considered not opening it. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and Nadine knew mine would win. Inside was a flash drive taped to a folded note. In her neat, looping handwriting, she'd written only 6 words: "Let's see how work likes this." My stomach twisted as I turned the drive over in my fingers. I didn't plug it in right away. Instead, I sat on my couch staring at it, trying to guess what kind of poison she'd loaded onto it. Photos? Emails? Something worse? Every option felt like a no-win situation. By the time I worked up the nerve to check, my hands were clammy. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting it to fry my hard drive. Instead, a single folder appeared. Inside were dozens of screenshots, private messages I'd sent her over the years. Most were harmless, but she'd cherry-picked and rearranged them to make it look like I'd been controlling, needy, even borderline obsessive. Out of context, it was damning. And tucked among them was a short video clip from our home security camera, a grainy shot of me pacing in the kitchen one night, clearly upset, muttering to myself after another argument. The audio was distorted, but it was enough to make me look unhinged if shown to the wrong audience. I didn't have to wait long to find out where she'd send it. That afternoon, my manager called me into her office. The flash drive sat on her desk. "Lowell," she began carefully, "someone sent us these materials anonymously, suggesting they might be relevant to your conduct outside of work. I can't say I understand what this is about, but it doesn't look good." My explanation, halting, defensive, incomplete, sounded weak even to my own ears. I wasn't in trouble yet, but I could feel the foundation under my job starting to crumble. That night, I called Nadine. I told myself it was to confront her, but deep down, I think I was hoping to find some shred of the woman I used to know. She answered on the second ring. "So," she said without greeting, "how's work?" Her tone was almost playful. I asked her why she was doing this, what she hoped to accomplish by tearing me down in every possible way. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You made a choice when you humiliated me in that restaurant," she said. "Now I'm making mine. And I promise you, I'm better at it." I wanted to yell, to curse, to throw the phone across the room, but instead I sat there, the words tangled in my throat. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. "If your goal is to destroy me," I said, "you're doing a good job." She didn't deny it. She just hung up. I spent the next day watching my email, bracing for more fallout. By evening, I thought maybe I'd caught a break, no calls from HR, no more packages. But then I checked my personal bank account. The balance made my vision blur. Money was missing. Thousands. Transfers I hadn't made. And as the panic set in, I realized there was only one other person who still had the details to make them. The moment I saw the empty account balance, my chest went cold. Years of savings, gone in a handful of transfers. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling that familiar helplessness start to creep in. But this time, something in me refused to sink all the way under. I was tired of reacting, tired of letting Nadine dictate every move, tired of giving her the satisfaction of watching me break. I grabbed my phone, not to call her, but to call my bank. Within an hour, I'd frozen every account, filed an official fraud report, and contacted the police. It turned out the transfers had been recent enough that they could be flagged and reversed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small, stubborn flicker of control returning. When the detective I spoke with asked if I wanted to press charges, I hesitated for less than a second. "Yes," I said. Not out of revenge, but because I finally understood something: it wasn't my job to protect her image anymore. Nadine had made her choices, and now she could face the consequences without me standing in the way. Within days, the money was restored, my work had cleared me of any wrongdoing, and she was left to explain herself to people who weren't nearly as patient as I'd been. The strangest part. Once the dust settled, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I moved to a smaller apartment across town, somewhere no one knew my name. I blocked her on every platform, changed my number, and finally stopped checking over my shoulder. My life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without waiting for the next blow. Looking back, I can't erase what happened in that restaurant, or the days that followed. But I can say this: walking away from someone who thrives on your pain is the first real step toward peace. And now, every time I pass Carson's on Main, I don't think about humiliation. I think about the moment I decided my life was worth more than the chaos she brought into it. Thanks for watching this story on Reddit Confessions. Now I want to hear from you. what moment in this story stood out to you the most, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I read every single one.